This episode is brought to you by SRB Field Rests. Your shotgun, bow, or rifle is an extension of who you are as a hunter. Whether you're hunting snows in a muddy mess of a field, mallards in the marsh, or whitetail from a ground blind, SRB Field Rests has your back. A local Kansas company that provides an easy-to-use, simple, and ergonomically effective solution to just awkwardly holding onto your gun or your bow when you do not need to, allowing you to have more freedom, comfort, and safety in the field. Enter discount code FOULFRONT at checkout for 10% off your order of any SRB Field Rest today. This episode is also brought to you by Oak Barn Beef, a direct-to-consumer, family-owned farm that delivers high-quality, DNA-tested, dry-aged Nebraska beef from their family to yours. You can select from a wide variety of boxes. My personal favorite is the Husker Beef package, which combines jerky, ground beef, steaks, and a brisket. These packages are perfect for families, get-togethers, out-of-town hunts, or for you outfitters looking to upgrade your table fare for your clients. Order yours today at oakbarnbeef.com.
And what's really important is that we band together, we speak with one voice.
And I was like, you sure? Because I've got 2 kids, I don't want it to ruin your hunt. And you're like, yeah, just come and hunt with me.
Just take your time. Like I said, it would have killed a normal man, but I'm not normal, but you know.
When you said, why do you want to talk about that? To me, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, there's so many different factors that go into this decision.
Enjoy it for what it is. Every moment of it. If you're only going to shoot one duck.
Welcome to the Foul Front Podcast, part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective.
Hey, Foul Front, it's Hannah from Oak Barn Beef. We're giving away a box of steaks, jerky, and more premium beef exclusively for the listeners of the Foul Front. To sign up, head over to foulfront.com and click on the Oak Barn Beef giveaway tab to enter into this giveaway. Thanks, and we can't wait for you to try our Nebraska-raised and dry-aged premium beef.
All right, welcome to the Foul Front Waterfowl Podcast, and today I have a very special guest with me. I've got Land Tawney from BHA, the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And so Land is a Montana native. He's a veteran in the conservation fight through multiple positions held in the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Program, the National Wildlife Federation, and in short, Land has spent his professional career building, energizing, and activating hunters and anglers to carry on our rich outdoor legacy. He's also a father, and I've been told if he could only hunt one more time in his life, he'd find himself in a duck blind. Land, welcome to the Foul Front. How'd I do on the intro?
Awesome, man. I'm going to have you introduce me every single time. Ben, that was sweet.
Awesome. And one thing I did miss, actually, Land is the CEO and president of BHA, not just with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So, how's the weather up there in Montana?
You know, it's one of those kind of balmy days at like 63 degrees, a little cloudy. We're supposed to get some weather this weekend, and maybe that'll be good for hunting. But right now, I think it'd be better to be probably tossing lined trout versus going and hunting ducks.
Yeah. What's the migration report saying?
Migration. I mean, we're starting to see a few northern birds, but nothing really yet. You know, we need a big cold kind of to bump them down, and so no big orange-legged beasts yet.
Yeah, I saw a couple mallards out when I was scouting today, but have you been out hunting at all this season?
I've gone a couple times with my kids. I've got 2 young kids, and we've gotten out and had a couple days where we had some new hunters with us as well. And so introduced them kind of to what it's all about. And so we've had, dogs made a few retrieves, but there's the days, the good days have not happened yet, but that will change at some point.
Awesome. So what's the game plan for tomorrow?
Tomorrow, so I've got this new boat that I bought. I bought a Lumacraft, like 14-foot boat, and I haven't taken it out yet. So tomorrow, I'm going to take the kids out. We'll do a little scouting, and then Sunday do it for real. And so there's a little place north of Missoula. I'm in Missoula, Montana, so western part of Montana, and we're not really in a flyway, kind of on the edge of the Pacific and edge of the Central. But there's a river north of us. It's got a bunch of grain fields and some corn on the outside of it. So we like going up there. So we're going to check it out and figure out where we want to set up for Sunday, and then try it out.
Awesome. You said you're taking your kids out again?
I am. I've got an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, and they've both, same thing as kind of me. I was in the duck blind with my father, 4 or 5 years old, and so I've done the same thing with them. And so they love getting out. They love watching the dog work, and they love watching those ducks get tricked.
Awesome. Good stuff. And then you do have a black lab, Thule?
Thule, yep, Thule. She's named after like the Thule reed. So
yeah.
If you ever heard of like the Thule elk, it's kind of like she's the Thule black lab. And she's sitting with me in the office right now. I just said her name. She picked up her head, which usually she's just sleeping. She's only 2.5. So she's got some things to learn, but she's one of my probably more calm labs I've ever had. And she's fun to be around, and then just super athletic in the field.
Awesome. So are you guys hunting from the boat, or is the boat just the means of conveyance?
Boats just gets us up there. We'll get a blind at some point for the boat and hunt out of it that way. But no, it's just to get us up to the edge of an island, and then we'll walk to the other side of the island and set up there. And that's there's a bunch of islands we're going to look at tomorrow to see which one we want to get on.
Awesome. Yeah. We have so much water down here in the Flint Hills of Kansas. Places that we normally are walking into are 18 foot deep right now. So we are putting together a little redneck armada right now. And it seems like the only way we can really get after them. Redneck, little John boats with some burlap and, 20-foot decoy lines. That's how we're kind of rolling down here right now. So.
And you guys going to hunt out of the boat then?
Yeah. So this year I got a kayak, which has been pretty awesome for scouting. I don't take it any place. I don't go across big open water, but I stick to the trees and the shore. But yeah, we got a couple John boats, and we can tuck them up into we're hunting out of the tops of trees right now, so it's pretty easy cover, honestly.
That's kind of like different kind of timber hunting, right? The tops of trees.
Yeah, exactly. We've definitely we've had to adapt, but we're still getting after it. And I'm
good for you.
I kind of like it. The rest of my group does not like it. But I kind of like it because it's not as much walking, because I always feel like I'm the guy that has to carry the most for some reason. And so I'm not walking in anywhere. I'm just putting in my kayak and I'm just paddling places, and it's pretty nice. So
that's cool, man. That's cool. It's always fun to try new things too. And sometimes you're forced into doing that. And, when you are forced, you figure out things that you never would have done before. So sounds like that's what your program is, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Land, where did you grow up?
So I'm a 5th generation Montanan. Grew up here in Missoula, and grew up here hunting with my father. Like I said before, kind of in duck blinds. We've got spring creeks around here, so when it gets super cold, those birds have nowhere else to go. It's when those rivers freeze up, and they've got these spring creeks, and so tall cottonwoods, and they got to come in pretty hot. And so I grew up doing that with my dad, and I think. I remember one of my favorite memories is going to the duck blind early in the morning and having a couple hundred birds lift off of this spring creek, and then having to come back in 4s and 5s and 10s or whatever all day, and I couldn't even shoot a gun, but I just remember that like it was yesterday, and kind of have just the sound of those birds taking off is something I'll never forget. Do you remember the first duck you shot? I remember a lot of misses. My dad gave me like a single shot 20 gauge. And so I would carry like another one in my mouth. And I think I would always like try to shoot so fast so I could stick that other one in there. And I missed a lot early. But I do remember I was actually hunting north on this river. We're going to go hunt this weekend, and was by myself with our black lab, walking up the bank as my dad and his friend were picking up decoys. And these 2 mallards, I could see them coming up the river from a long ways away. And so I hid behind this tree, and I swung on both of them and shot one of them, lo and behold. And then my first black lab I've ever had jumped out and grabbed that bird for me. And I remember the rejoicing that I had with the dog, and then the definite, the beaming, I guess, that came out of my father. And I I'll never forget that piece. Of just the kind of smile he had, and bringing that home and eating it that night. It was something pretty darn special.
That's great. That's great. Now, you said 5th generation Montanan. That's so like your family must have settled or like helped settle Montana, right?
Yeah, we were. My first family member that was born in Montana was born here in 1872, just south of Missoula, in a town called Stevensville, which was the first incorporated town in Montana. We didn't come here for the land. We came here for the timber. We came from Nova Scotia. We were Irish. Came from across the pond, went to Nova Scotia, and followed timber kind of to Montana. And then they ended up being the first mortuaries in the Bitterroot Valley, which is that funeral home is still in our family today.
Oh, okay, interesting. That's cool. Being able to, be surrounded kind of by your family history. Mine's everywhere: Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Colorado. It's everywhere. But that's cool. All right, so you grew up in Montana. Where did you go to school?
So I went to school for a little bit out in Seattle at Seattle University, and then my father got sick with cancer and passed away, and so that brought me home. And I will tell you that's like kind of the silver lining of his death, is that I was kind of out in Seattle screwing around, and then I came home and ended up getting a wildlife biology degree at the University of Montana, and kind of set me on my path of conservation, I guess, from there.
Now, your dad, he was a pretty big conservationist as well, correct?
Yeah, he and my mom were the first full-time kind of conservation lobbyists at the state legislature here in Montana. Then my dad went to law school later in life and ended up being the first lawyer for the Elk Foundation when they first incorporated, when they were still up in northwest Montana. And I was with them until he passed away. But this was right when conservation easements were starting to become a big deal. Yeah. And so, there's refuges and private land all over Montana that has my dad's kind of signature on it. And, with the Elk Foundation, I've got a picture in my office where he's holding a big bucket of Budweiser in one hand and a big bucket of Bud Light in the other hand. They had just gotten a check from Budweiser for $500,000, which was their first big check, and ended up going for a purchase just outside of Yellowstone for some migrating elk. So, with his work and with my mom's work, I've always kind of been around conservation. And so I think it was a lot of osmosis. I think, growing up, I was interested in it, but, not too involved. And then, I think, again, the silver lining of my dad passing away, I got serious about, kind of what I wanted to do in the world, and really settled on conservation and kind of carrying on his legacy and others.
Yeah, and you have a sister that is also in conservation, right? I think didn't she work for DU for a while?
Yeah, she was their water lobbyist out in D.C. for, God, she's going to listen to this and yell at me for not knowing, but I think it was like 6-7 years. And then she just moved back to Montana, and she is working for the Montana Conservation Voters. So she's got conservation deep in her blood as well.
So when you're growing up and you're like a little kid, I guess I wouldn't say it's too unique, because a lot of people out there get, the conservation business from their parents growing up. But you guys, especially, it sounds like, what was that like? What was it like growing up, being in a conservation at the forefront of probably a lot of things that you guys did?
I think that, again, I don't know if I necessarily realized it. My young daughter at 11 right now, she's definitely understands what's going on and is super engaged and kind of in the middle of it. I think, for me, it was like going to the first elk camp that the Elk Foundation had, and there was 200 people there in Spokane, Washington. And, now their elk camp probably draws, 20, 30,000 people. And so it was kind of seeing those humble beginnings, I think, and then being around the people that helped start that, like Bob Munson and others, and Gary Wolf, to name another one. And these really, I guess, magnanimous kind of leaders and kind of the bootstraps and picking that up. So, we were getting yanked to meetings where that was the Elk Foundation or their conservation organizations all the time. And I think as a kid, I got to meet a lot of people. But I don't think the message really set in, to be totally honest, until, again, I think till my father passed away. And then I kind of realized, you start looking at his life and, talking to folks about kind of his contributions, and you're like, whoa, that's what that was all about. And so I think, that's really when my kind of light bulb went off in my head. It's like, that's kind of what I want to do. And so
what year did your father pass?
It was 95. So a ways away now, 24 years ago.
Yeah. And just so everybody knows, how old a guy are you, Land?
I'm just a young pup, though I think I'm a young pup, but I'm realizing I'm probably not. But I'm 44 years old, so that happened when I was 19 years old.
All right. If I told, okay, so you can't say hunting, fishing, or trying to preserve public lands and habitat. You can't answer with any of those to this next question. Okay, what are your hobbies?
Oh, so little known fact, I like to get up every single morning and do the crossword and the Sudoku that's in the paper. And when I do those and finish them, I feel like I'm ready to just crush the day. And when I don't, I feel like I'm off a little bit. It's something my grandfather used to do, and I picked up from him, and I was horrible at it, and now I'm getting much better at it. So that's one. The other one is I grew up playing soccer, and I've coached soccer, and my kids are playing soccer now, and so I'm helping coach them. And so I'd say soccer is another one. And then, wow, I don't know if I can have a third one for you. I'm trying to think. I can't say those other words. I mean, I'm kind of a bird nerd too. I will say that when I was going to school and everybody was, like we took ornithology and there was a bunch of bird nerds in there. I was like, man, these people are crazy about birds. And it's kind of weird. Now, which I guess it kind of gets us into the conservation maybe, but when I'm out in the woods, like knowing different species of birds or finding out more about birds, I've turned into a fairly big bird nerd as well.
So I think that's like a step in a lot of hunters or conservationists, path, I guess, because I've noticed that some of the people that I know that are a little bit more advanced or well-traveled through there.
Oh, that's what you're saying is advanced. Okay.
A little bit older or well-traveled or something, however you want to say it, whatever euphemism it is. Yeah. They're always like, hey, look, it's a red-winged blackbird. And I go,
right?
Is it a duck? And no, but it's still important to know that. And things of that nature. But I guess that's kind of interesting. I guess if you give somebody a checklist of birds, it might, spur them on a little bit. But
I'm not really like, there's people that have like life, lists and stuff. I'm not that guy. What I do is I think it enhances my time outdoors. And so, when I'm in the marsh in particular, and you got a great blue heron or something that flies in and then blows up in your decoys and sounds like a damn pterodactyl as it's flying off, or you have, a kingfisher that I've seen this multiple times where they'll catch a fish, sideways in their mouth after they dive. And they'll be flying by you, and as they're flying by you, they flip that up in the air and swallow it like midair. Like they're like the Michael Jordans of like the bird world. Like it's just, I think it just enhances my time out there, and so that's why I think I've become more and more of a bird nerd.
I've been kind of doing that with plants recently. I just, somebody kind of told me like one, or I think I heard it somewhere, but they're like, yeah, these super hunters are sitting in a tree and they don't even know what kind of tree it is. And I like, I was like, what tree am I in? Oh, okay, I'm in an oak tree. All right, good. Whew. And the things of those nature, and just walking around and not realizing, oh, look at how natural this place is. Well, it's not really, because there's a bunch of red ferns there, or red cedar, and things of that nature. And I think that's a good like little step as well. So maybe birding and ornithology will be one of my next things I get into, but we'll see.
Next time we talk, you'll be all bird nerding it out.
Perfect. Okay, so you finish up at you said, was it Missoula
University of Montana?
University of Montana. I guess how many colleges do you guys have in Missouri?
Montana.
Yeah. Or I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I was thinking Missouri breaks, and yeah, my bad.
I mean, we have the two big schools. We have University of Montana, which is here in Missoula, and that's home of the Grizz, like go Grizz. And then you have Montana State, which is over in Bozeman, that's the Bobcats. And then you have, I think some schools that are associated with both of them, but those are the two big main schools, I would say, in Montana. Okay. You have some satellites, and then, a couple other schools like Carroll College and Helena, and then another school in Butte. But the majority because college wise, it's just in Missoula and Bozeman.
All right, awesome. So you finish up at school, and then you got to go pay those student loans off.
Right.
Where do you find yourself?
So I painted the houses for that summer, and I decided that's not what I wanted to do. And so there was an organization just starting at that point. It was the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. One of the guys who had helped start the Elk Foundation, Bob Munson, was kind of running the show there. And so he didn't have any paid positions, and so I went in there and volunteered and did data entry, did cold calling, and that all worked into a part-time position eventually, and then a full-time position. And so I worked for them for 3.5 years. And I think besides getting to work with Bob Munson, I got to work with a guy named Fred Myers, who I learned a ton from. And then the one that I probably cherished the most that I got to be around at such a young age was this guy by the name of Jim Range. And Jim Range is no longer with us, but he was a lawyer from D.C. He was chief of staff for Howard Baker, helped write the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts, big, huge waterfowl hunter. He trained his black lab on the Senate floor in those aisles. We all know that you need like a narrow place to train a young dog, and that's what he decided to do. And so he's just a kind of a character. And so I got to be around, him. And so my time at TRCP is really, I think, where I started to cut my teeth in the conservation world, and I couldn't, be more thankful for that.
Awesome. So then, coming out of the TRCP, what were some of the big projects that you kind of remember from that you worked on there?
I think the biggest one I would tell you is when we got open fields passed through the Farm Bill, and so open fields is the common way to talk about it, but it's basically helps states with their public access to private land programs. So, we've got a huge one here in Montana called block management, which is like 8 million acres. You've got a good one in Kansas. There's these programs all across the country. Now, back when that happened, so early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of states that have these programs. And so open fields was basically established through the Farm Bill to help establish these programs in states that didn't have programs, and then also enhance, the programs of states that already had programs. And so, to me, I think that was probably one of the bigger victories that we had when I was at TRCP, and something I'm pretty proud of.
Awesome. So that would be like the equivalent to Kansas's like WEHA or
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the walk-in programs, there's not a lot of money in this program. Fully realized it's like $50 million. So when you think about that split between 50 states, it's $1 million a state. And so it doesn't go very far.
Sure.
But it does help leverage money. And, it's always something that we're trying to increase. But, it was something I think that, was desperately needed. And I think there's been a great response to it.
I think a lot of people, so even especially myself, I think that it gets kind of intimidating trying to follow conservation news.
Sure.
It seems like there's a lot of things that are buried. It seems like there's only one or two sources that you can really get it from, and it's usually a third party media company that already kind of has it watered down for you and digestible. Do you have any tips for myself and the listeners on how to stay abreast with like the most news when it comes to like conservation issues, things that are going good, things that are going bad, things of that nature?
Yeah, this would be a selfless plug for backcountry hunters and anglers, but I think that we do a good job through our social media and through kind of our email list of keeping people informed, kind of sending that information, and then making it easy for you to take action. That's what we are as an advocacy organization. I would say the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, which I used to work for, I'd say they're another entity that the folks should definitely weigh in with. And then on waterfowl specific stuff, Ducks Unlimited and Delta Waterfowl, they're less advocacy organizations, more habitat and kind of organizations. And so, you will get definitely, and we can talk about stuff that we're working on together, but you will get things from them, but they're much differently set up than we are that way. But great thing about the world we're living in right now is that you can go find information. And I know we're all busy, and so like the easier that is, the better. But, if there's something that you care about, you can get multiple angles, on the great, wild world of the interweb. And so, I again, belong to BHA, belong to Delta, belong to Ducks Unlimited. Watch what TRCP is doing, but make sure you're doing kind of your own research too.
Yeah, kind of good little transition there. So let's talk about BHA for a little bit. Go ahead. What is BHA for people that are, they hear it everywhere else, but what is it?
Yeah, so, we're a grassroots organization. We were formed around a campfire in 2004. I don't know if you've ever been around with your buddies sitting around a campfire, but that's where, you can solve the world's problems.
Yep.
And really when they were, that first kind of initial campfire, they're looking at the playing field. There's all these folks doing good work, whether that's Ducks Unlimited or the Elk Foundation or Mule Deer Foundation, Pheasants Forever. Very habitat focused, mostly on private land. They looked at kind of this playing field that is public lands and public waters, and nobody was really focused on it. So that was really the impetus of the organization to start, is let's make sure this public land is not only accessible to everybody, but then when you get there that you have the fish and wildlife habitat. And so that's really, what we've kind of been the mantra for BHA for the last, 15 years, or going on 15 years, or I guess we are in 15 years. And we do that at kind of different levels. I think that there's the kind of state, kind of local level, and where that's working with like state legislatures on policies, whether that's doing like local cleanups or restoration efforts. Then you get into kind of watershed level, stuff where we're looking at landscapes and figuring out kind of either, how that's managed travel wise or how that's managed resource wise. And that's a big time compromise. And then, all the way out to Washington, D.C. And, we work on a lot of things out in Washington, D.C. that have, very kind of broad implications for what else is going on around the country. And one I pick out in particular would be the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is the kind of number one access tool that we have in this country. It's been used in 99% of the counties in this country. And it basically provides money to find access, and I hunt a lot off rivers here in Montana. We have a great stream access law, but the fishing access sites that I put on and at or use to walk in at, those are almost exclusively paid for by the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And so this has been something that, we've been laser focused on. And this last spring, we're able to get it permanently authorized, and it was a huge win. And now we're looking to fully fund it. So that's kind of the nutshell. I think that's a quick and dirty, from the the local of the local all the way out to, the big stuff that happens in DC.
Yeah. So for a listener that is listening, that's familiar with Ducks Unlimited and Delta, and I don't mean to compare, but what are some similarities and what are some differences in backcountry hunters and anglers?
Yeah, so I think, some similarities is we work very closely on Washington, D.C. policy. Both of Ducks Unlimited and Delta have big kind of shops that think about, like kind of that national policy. Mm-hmm. And so whether that's, Land and Water Conservation Fund that we already talked about, whether that's the Clean Water Rule, whether that's the North American Wetland Conservation Act, there's those things that we work on out in D.C. I think the biggest difference between the two, or between, I guess, us three, is that, we don't just work out in D.C. We work at like pretty local levels too, and really engage our grassroots that way. I think with Ducks Unlimited in particular, a lot of that money that's raised and kind of the energy that is happening with their volunteers is to, preserve duck habitat and to restore marshes and stuff. And I think that's amazing work. And, where would we be without them? But our work is, we're doing more and more of that, but the most majority of what we do is really getting engaged in policy at a local level. And so, making it easy for people to get engaged. And, we don't do, one banquet a year. We're kind of doing activities all the time. And not to, again, I know that there's more that's going on with Delta and DU, but I think our membership is you know, the money part is important, but the advocacy part is the most important part about what we do.
Yeah, that was one thing that kind of opened my eyes about once I started volunteering a little bit more with DU. It was they were really, it's good about the money. Like everyone's money's good, but just saying that you're a member or like signing up and being a voice and someone that's like, hey, this person supports this is super important to organizations like yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think since we are a grassroots organization and we rely on those grassroots people, to make phone calls, send emails, show up at meetings, all to influence kind of policy, is that we need the people. We're nothing. You and I can talk on this phone, and I can go try to call a senator here or governor there, whoever it is, and yeah, they may take my phone call, but now that we have 40,000 members, they listen a little bit different than when we had 2,000 members. And so that's the people on the ground. And those are people, in their state, that they need to listen to. And, in Kansas, we just started a new chapter there, and, we've already started working, kind of with the local, fish and game folks and, elected officials. And so that's kind of the way we work. And, without those people, we are nothing.
Yeah. So to, the layman, the guy that, maybe isn't, deeply involved in volunteering, but just wants to be a member and whatnot. What does that membership look like to him on a yearly basis? Is he going to a banquet, or is he going to, little, like you said, meetings and things of that nature? Yep. What did it look like?
So membership is $25 a year. So it's, I think, a pretty easy entry point. And then after that, we really don't do big banquets. We've kind of, I think we've all been to those banquets and they raise good money. But if you've been to one banquet, you've almost been to them all. And
I'm
so we've tried to change that model.
Hungover from our banquet last night. So
exactly right. And so, but it was a good time, right? And I'm not saying that they aren't, but you almost know what to expect when you get there, and that you should probably drink a little bit more water than you did last night. But we have pint nights, which are at local breweries or bars or whatever, and have people come together and kind of talk about the issues that are going on at that point. We do storytelling nights. We do wild game cook-offs. We had this awesome program this summer that was its third year, where we have this hike the hunt, where people get together and are hiking in preparation, for the fall season. And so we have this, it's like a really community centric piece where we're not seeing each other once a year, but, we're seeing each other multiple times of the year. And so I think that's the first piece. I think the second piece is then again, it's how much you want to get involved. If you want to just be a member and get our magazine 4 times a year and, give us a little bit of scratch, awesome. I'm glad to have you on the team. If you want to show up at a meeting and voice your opinion about X issue, even better. If you want to head out to Washington, D.C. with us, and do it when we do a fly-in, almost probably the best. And so there's just these different ways for people to engage at a grassroots level. And really that's up to, you as the individual. And, we're not a place, I think, again, you asked me this, so I guess I can say it again, but I'm 44 and I'm, there's only one person, 2 people that are older than me on staff. And so we're a very young staff and we're a very young organization. Our organization, 70% of our members are 45 and younger. And so this isn't a place where you got to spend your time and pay your dues until you can have leadership positions. We recognize talent, we recognize energy, and we try to facilitate that right away. And so, no matter who you are, what kind of background you have, there's a place for you at BHA, and if you're willing to put in some work.
Why, as a duck hunter, why the heck should I care about BHA?
Great question. So I think, first and foremost, let's talk about public water. I think public water is absolutely essential to hunting birds. And, I grew up in Montana and I had access to some private property, but the majority of what I hunted was public land and continue to hunt today. I think, I have friends all over this country and they buy into duck leases, which I think is totally fine. And, I think there's definitely a place for that. But, public water is a place where it doesn't matter, how much money you have. If you got, some energy and a couple of feet and maybe a little kayak, they can get out and go do it. And so preserving these places that I think that are open for everybody, and I think there's a couple of things that we're doing there. I've already talked about a couple of them. I'll reiterate. It's this open fields piece that I helped pass back at, my days at TRCP. Like every single time the farm bill comes up, we've got to fight for dollars to put into open fields. And so that's something that BHA is definitely committed to, and we work with other folks to do. And so I think that's why it matters. I think that, we've talked about the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the importance of that. It's something that is probably our number one priority, that again, that provides money to promote access. And then, we talked about NACA, the North American Wetland Conservation Act, which is really about habitat. I would say, at a local level, it's really about access. And I'll give you a couple examples. So, South Dakota, there's these lakes in South Dakota that have been open to public hunting. Public money has been spent on boat ramps and great waterfowl hunting opportunities. If you've never been to South Dakota to hunt ducks, it's world class. And some private landowners decided that they didn't like duck hunters out there. So they decided that they were going to fight that and start privatizing these lakes. And so they shut down a lot of lakes. We worked there at the local legislature to kind of find a compromise, which I'm not super happy about, but it is a compromise where basically we've been splitting lakes in half. And so we still have an opportunity to hunt there, but just not the whole lake, which again, I don't think it's ideal, but it was better than nothing. Right. Down Louisiana, there's the Catahoula Lake, which it's a huge waterfowl destination. Same thing, private landowners shut that off. We've been working with the state. The state actually entered into a lawsuit that's within the Supreme Court right now. We're not part of that lawsuit. Besides, we did this is going to get super technical, but we did like an amicus brief to talk about kind of just in support of the state. And so that's literally in the Supreme Court right now. And we're looking for a decision there in either January or February of this year. And that's just on one lake in Louisiana. They've also got some access issues just because that marsh has been disappearing down there for almost 80 years. And so that's caused conflicts where people are putting up makeshift gates and keeping people out of bays that they've, traditionally been able to hunt. Yeah. So we're working at, we're working on kind of a legislation solution there as well. I think, the courts are just not a place to do that. I think it's, better to find compromise at a legislative level. Here in Montana, which I'll just say one more, we're defending stream access. Stream access is super important to trout fishing here in Montana. If you don't know what it is, it's like you have a river. When that river runs hot in the spring, real super high, it's called the high water mark. And so we have access in Montana on the bottom of the river and then up to the high water mark. And so great for trout fishing. If I want to pull my boat over and fish a little bit or have a lunch, I'm awesome. But what that does for me for waterfowl hunting is I've got spots where I can, where there's a legally public access. I can get in. Once I get to the river, now I have a ton of legal access. And I'll walk, either 1 or 2 miles upstream or 1 or 2 miles downstream and get to a spot where some birds are holding. And without that access, I wouldn't have those opportunities. And so I think if I had to sum it up, Ben, we're working on large scale habitat stuff out in DC and then access out in DC and then access at a local level.
What's it like? I imagine that you frequently find yourself in conversations with lawmakers and congressmen, Republicans, Democrats, everybody, trying to tell them these stories and get them to understand what we're talking about. What's it like?
It kind of depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, sure.
There's some folks that recognize the importance of hunting and fishing, not only as kind of a tradition, kind of family values, I would say the good, clean living that is, and then the economic value. I think some folks, definitely recognize that and others don't. And so with the folks that recognize that, it's always trying to, figure out kind of what the solutions are to maybe the problems of the day. For the people that don't recognize that, I think those conversations are tougher. And so you're trying to find, common ground in other places. And I think, one thing that I think hunters and anglers, waterfowlers in particular, know is that like clean water is super, super important. Yeah. And so, without clean water, like we don't have the invertebrate populations that help, really bolster our duck populations. And so to me, I think thinking about clean water, is one of the like bigger unifiers for folks that don't hunt and fish. And so that's, I think you can always find common values, but I think one thing to keep in mind is all these elected officials, they're people too. And, at the end of the day, they work for us. And so treat them just like you would anybody else. I think be cordial when you're talking to them, and then, and don't be intimidated. Again, they're just people. And so, that's the way I do it. And I think that's the way I try to counsel people, like when we're flying out to DC or when they're meeting people at a local level, is to really try to find common ground, be honest, and then realize they're just people too.
Yeah. I always find it, it has to be one of those things where once you sit down and explain it to somebody, and how it's not just, shooting ducks and killing deer, you talk about all the, the good things, people usually go, oh yeah, well, that's pretty nice. But
right.
Like, I just don't know how people don't know that in 2019, how that rhetoric is not, echoing, and it's strange. And I just always wondered if it was even at the, the highest levels of, government, if it's, it's something that's being brought up every day or once a week or what it is,
Yeah. I think it's a constant education. There's hunters, as you probably know, that have no idea about kind of where duck stamp dollars go.
Right.
They know they got to buy their federal duck stamp every single year, but, they're like, I don't know what that's for. That's just like a license that I have to buy. I don't really know where that money goes. And so I think it's always a constant education, and whether that's within our own ranks or outside of that. And I don't ever fault anybody for that, or I look at that almost as a challenge, Ben, and I think it's like, it's a super important thing. I've been like, education advocacy is really what BHA does. And I think, what you're doing with this podcast and, I think other venues where we can educate people. Again, the duck stamp is super simple. When, you talk to people about how that helps pay for our national wildlife refuges in particular, whether that's maintaining what they are now or purchasing kind of new areas, it's like light bulbs start to go off in their head, and that's something that they can be proud of. And so that, when somebody asks them kind of what it does, then they'll be educated the next time to be able to pass along that information. That's really, I think one of the most important roles that we have as leaders, and also just kind of hunter conservationists, is to really tell the story, and then hopefully have other people, pass that on as well. Yeah.
I think though too, it's really hard for people to empathize with it without the emotional connection to it. You and I, when we think of that, some of the best times we've had have been out there, or we'd have an emotional connection to all of it. Whereas other people, that sounds great, Ben, but not until I, took a new guy duck hunting. He's like, dude, I get it. I get why you're so like, you're crazy about this stuff. And he goes, it's not like personally, like, he's like, I'm not going to go do this every weekend, but I get what fires you up about it. And I get why you care so much. And I think until you are like exposed to that or have that emotional bridge in there, I don't think you can accurately understand it. So.
Yeah, but I can hear it in your voice, right? You got the duck fever, and it's because you've been out there in the marsh. And I think partly I can tell your excitement, like, and we're talking over the phone right now, like I can hear that. And I think that's partly, again, like our jobs is to kind of tell those stories and kind of exude that passion. And, at the very least, somebody understands that this is something that's super important to you. They may never go do it, but at least they'll understand how important it is. And then again, I think finding things that are universal, like clean water, to talk about is always, a good path.
I did a little bit of research and listened to some other podcasts that you've been on. And one of the things that I wrote down that I thought was just super interesting. You were on a roll about something. You said, it's hard for me. I have to, when I present the information, I can just talk about the doom and gloom and fire and brimstone. I don't think you didn't use those words, but that was how it was portrayed in my head. And then you have to we got to talk about the successes too. And we can't always come at it. So everything's on fire right now. We got to save this. We got to save that, even though that's maybe how you feel in your heart. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah. I think that, there's always going to be pressures on our outdoor kind of, legacy that was kind of gifted to us. I don't think that's ever going to go away. And, you know, with the pressures and, you know, that I think they ebb and flow right now. There's a few that, you know, make me super nervous. But you know, I think at the end of the day, what we're selling is this just uniquely American attribute where you and I and anybody listening to this, you know, we live like kings, you know, and like nobody else in the world has what we have here in America. I think, you know, Canada is definitely close. In some ways it's better in places. New Zealand maybe has some good public land kind of hunting opportunities. But the United States, that's way different. And we should be proud of that and really celebrate that. And then take that, you know, to help us, you know, on this day-to-day kind of management of those public lands, public waters. And while, you know, sometimes the weight of the world, you know, it feels like it's on your shoulders, I think reminding ourselves about how awesome things are is a good thing. I would also say if you look at history, you know, in America, every time these pressures have kind of happened, like great things have happened, you know, as a result. And so if you look at, you know, market killing for waterfowl that was happening in, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s, you know, basically wiping waterfowl, you know, off the face of this country. I don't know if you've ever seen punt guns and those big old guns that they, you know, put on the front of a john boat and kill a whole raft of birds. Like that was happening to put food on the table, you know, in New York and DC, Chicago, San Francisco, all these big cities. And then we decided, well, you can't profit off the sale of wildlife anymore. And, you know, you can't do that for either food. I mean, a lot of women were putting feathers in their hats back then. And so we stopped the sale of kind of wildlife. And, you know, that was a huge thing that hunters did. And good things came out of that bad. You know, you look at like the dirty 30s, you know, and the lids coming off the prairie and you have the Dust Bowl and, you know, waterfowl populations are in trouble then. That's, you know, like we did the Pittman-Robertson Act, you know, to tax ourselves on ammunition and guns. And then, you know, we passed the duck stamp where we signed into law like 1934. And so good things came out of bad. You look at like the 60s and like, you know, there's rivers like basically on fire. And, you know, we passed the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts. And like, that's really why we have, you know, some of the cleanest air and cleanest water in the world is because of that. That came out of bad times. And so what I feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. I'm always kind of think about how that galvanizes people and how it compels us to act. And I think, you know, so when you feel like the weight of the world's on your shoulders, like try to figure out, okay, how is that going to bring more people together? And like, what is the solution? And for me, you know, I'm always looking for solutions. Here at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, we're always looking for solutions. And so that it isn't just that doom and gloom and that, you know, we can try to figure a path forward.
Where are we at right now? Are we in a heyday? Are we in a good thing? Or like, where are we at? Are we slipping? What's going on?
I feel like we're slipping a little bit, you know, and I'd say that for two reasons. I think that, you know, if we just stick with waterfowl populations have been all-time highs, you know, for the last, you know, 5 years, decade. I mean, you know, there's certain pockets, obviously, we can talk about where they're not doing as good, but in general, you know, waterfowl populations are doing well. I mean, there's turkeys everywhere. You know, there's the white-tailed deer populations are doing great. And so I feel like we're like almost complacent a little bit. Yeah. And then you look at, you know, like waterfowl in particular, the two major threats to that right now would be kind of the conservation reserve program, like less and less acres being enrolled there, less and less money being spent, you know, there. And I don't know how much your listeners know about that, but, you know, it's basically paying farmers to put land in fallow. And so these are great nesting areas for waterfowl in particular. Like waterfowl can nest up to a mile away from water, and they do a lot of that in the conservation reserve program. And now that program's going away, there's less nesting habitat. So I'm nervous about that piece. You know, this latest kind of administrative rule by the administration on the Clean Water Act that takes away protections for temporary wetlands. You know, temporary wetlands are only these wetlands that are in the spring or, you know, wet because there's a lot of water around. That's where the invertebrate habit, you know, life is huge. And so, you know, a young hen mother with a brood, like she needs those bugs to help grow her chicks. And so those protections have been taken away there. And so there's some definite threats right now. And again, I think that It's galvanizing people, and it's having people, from all sorts of walks of life come together. And an example of that, I did talk about the Land and Water Conservation Fund earlier and how we got that, passed this last spring. But what I didn't tell you is that, that vote in the Senate was 92-8. That vote in the House was 363-62. Like, those are overwhelming majorities. Those are veto-proof majorities, which, tell me there's not many other things that they're voting on out there in DC right now that's like that, right? And so that gives me some hope. And that's because, it wasn't because there was a bunch of senators and congressmen out in DC that were like, wow, this is a good idea. It's because the people demanded it, The people said, you have to do this for us. And so, while you may be on one issue on healthcare over here on the wall or whatever, all these other issues that are out there, conservation is where we kind of came together in public lands and public waters. And so I feel like, that gives me hope, but there's some definite threats, and, and to tend to, kind of ignore those, I think, is at our peril.
What's the thing that, like, you wake up at night and you're like, oh man, that freaking thing. Like, I can't believe it's what's your nightmare like right now?
I mean, my nightmare, that's a great question. I think, I've talked about a couple of the things that are going on. I think one that's never going to go away, that is probably the one that freaks me out the most, is this idea of the sale of public lands. We have 640 million acres that is yours, it's mine, it's anybody that's listening to this. We have this gigantic, vast kingdom that is very diverse, that belongs to us all. And the idea, of selling that to the highest bidder, that's what keeps me up at night. And, I feel like if, as the population grows in this country and, hunting and fishing, even if our numbers started to grow, we would still be, less and less of a percentage. These places that provide access to us all are just going to be vitally important going forward. And, they already play a vital role, and I think are going to be even more important as we go forward. So, what freaks me out probably the most is, when senators talk about, the sale of public lands and talk about, how they're just, they give no contribution to society, and that we should get rid of them. And that to me is just a fundamentally different philosophy than I share.
Is there a list of people, how can you go and you can find okay, oh man, my senator actually does not like public lands or would like to sell it? Is there a good list, bad list for conservation people? So awesome. As local elections come up so people can kind of wade those things. Because I feel like you have to study a lot to make the right decision when it comes to voting.
Very astute the way you're thinking about that. I think that the short answer is that those lists, don't exist. As we're talking today, in a robust way. There's talked about my sister earlier, who works for the Montana Conservation Voters. There's a national organization called the League of Conservation Voters, and so they do definitely they do kind of scorecards and show people how people vote. That is way less hunting centric, and it's much, more kind of on the environmental side. And so that would give an indication, but I don't think it tells the whole story. And so last election cycle, we did candidate questionnaires in 3 states, Colorado, Wisconsin, and New Mexico. And so, we're a nonprofit. We can't tell you who to vote for, but what we can do is we can report the news. And so, we asked all the candidates exactly the same questions, and then reported that news, and then let people make up their own minds. And so that was in 3 states. We're coming up on another election cycle here in 2020, and we plan to do that in as many states as possible. We have, chapters in 45 states now, and so potentially we could do all 45. But to answer your question, there isn't that one-stop shop, one to say that person's good, that person's bad. And we can't do that at BHA, vote for this person, vote for this person. What we can do is kind of, paint a picture about, when there is votes, let's say on Land and Water Conservation Fund or North American Wetland Conservation Act, we can inform you at that point about that vote. And then you can kind of start to make your own decisions that way. Right. But I would say I mean, one of the reasons why we're trying to do these candidate questionnaires is for the exact thing that you brought up, is there's really not a one-stop shop for that right now. And, you know, and we're going to try to make that a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, of course, always looking for the cheat sheet or the easy sheet. You know?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Nice. But, so question, as I look at the map of, BHA places, like where BHA is, I look at my home state of Nebraska and I don't see anything, in Nebraska.
That's because nobody hunts there.
Yeah, nobody hunts in Nebraska.
I'm kidding. I got to the Sandhills last fall, and what a special place that is. And the Sandhills are just, I mean, you want to talk about some public land that you can go get lost in. That's I mean, just phenomenal.
That or just the Platte River too. I don't know if
absolutely what a waterfowl destination that is, you know, and like think about all the cranes and stuff that are there. Like, it's pretty special. And so here's what I'll tell you is we got 5 states that we don't have. So Hawaii, Nebraska, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Delaware. And there is a chapter in the works right now in Nebraska and in South Carolina and in West Virginia. We go places, Ben, where we have energy. You know, we've been growing so fast for the last 6 years that, you know, we can't afford to like go out and prospect places. We have to go kind of where we have energy. Yeah. So we're starting to get a bunch of energy in Nebraska, and you know, for probably the 2 reasons that you talk about, the Platte and then the Sandhills. And so I would, if I'm a betting man, I'd say that we'd have a chapter come on board in June next year at our annual meeting, where we kind of bring on all our chapters, and that's really because of the energy that's kind of on the ground, and the leadership that's starting to form around that. And you know, Ty Stubblefield, who kind of does all our new chapters, he has much more of a pulse on that. But you know, we talked before this, and I mean, he's pretty definite that we'll have a chapter there in Nebraska as well. Yeah, good. And so if you're in one of those states that you just listened to, you know, go check out BHA's website, and your guys' newsletter is really great. I've been appreciating that a lot. Now this is the electronic one? Yeah. The magazine? Yeah. No, the electronic one. Sorry, the email. Cool. Yeah, it's been really great. I have not received yet. I've only been a BHA member, I think, for like 2 or 3 months now. Dude, welcome to the team. Oh, thank you. Yes. Thanks. You know, I've been aware of it for the last probably 1.5, 2 years. But I don't know. I just recently just started digging into it, and whether, you know, it's evolution of myself as you know, conservationist or whatever it is. I looked at it and I said, why? What? I've always been a proponent of if you're going to give, you know, $35 to Ducks Unlimited, might as well give another $35 to Delta, and now BHA is on that list as well, because I don't, you know, help these different organizations out that have your best interests at heart. If you don't have anything local, and you know, you don't have the fire to start it up, you know, volunteer at the organization that fits you best locally. But yeah, so if you're in one of those states, you know, go check it out and see if it's for you. So. Yeah, I mean, it's again, like, we go where the energy is, and it's a lot of fun being a part of this organization. And I think we've got a new take on conservation, and you should check it out. We talked a lot about doom and gloom, right? For the last probably 20 minutes. What's not too bad. What's the bright sunshine though? What do we got? What are you excited for? I mean, man, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and you know, I talked about our demographics earlier on the kind of the age piece, and I'm super excited about us, you know, having 70% of our members being 45 and younger, because I feel like that's like this next generation of conservation leaders. And you know, you look at many other organizations, and it's flipped the other way, where, you know, maybe 70% of the members are 65 and older, you know? And so I feel like I'm excited about this next generation of kind of hunters. I'm excited that, you know, within those demographics that we're very split pretty evenly on our political affiliations. And so, you know, again, like, conservation is bringing people together. Public lands is bringing people together. So I'm excited about that. You know, and I guess I'm just excited about the people that are, part of our organization. We just this like last month, we have an Ohio chapter that just became a chapter last year, and they worked with the state agency. There was some property that had traditionally been open to the public. It was timberland that was now going to be sold. They worked with the state agency. They worked with the state legislature. And lo and behold, they picked up 38,000 acres of new public land in Ohio that's going to be there in perpetuity. And that's awesome. Yeah. Awesome stuff. Our chapter in Colorado, there was some state land that was unavailable for hunting, and worked with the governor, worked with the state legislature. And now there's 100,000 acres with an option for 400,000 more. And to me, I got people on the ground doing things. And so when I see kind of the energy, that I see every time I travel across the country, like I'm super stoked about this kind of legacy and like where we're headed. And, I think that momentum is building, and I think that, that momentum breeds success. And so, where that's, what we're doing here at BHA with other partners as well. We're working with Pheasants Forever this year at their big annual meeting to have like this public lands pavilion, which they've never done before. And we're going to be a big part of that, and like really teaching kind of like pheasant hunters, which have primarily been on private land, like what public land kind of hunting looks like. And so I'm stoked about that. And the glass is always half full, and I try not to get too doom and gloom. And if I do, I'll let myself be like that for a little bit and then slap myself upside the head. Like, hey man, it's not so bad.
Nice. All right. So as we kind of wind down here, nice. Hey there, folks. Hey, sorry about the conversation cutting off there. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I hope that you enjoyed this conversation that I had with Land. Like I said, the last 5 minutes or so got cut off, but no big deal, because me and Land talked, and I think we're gonna have him back on the show in a couple more episodes, just to talk about a little bit more about public land hunting and how to get involved with BHA. Not only that, but get a little bit more of his stories and some fun duck stuff. So, hey, folks, appreciate it. I will see you on Friday with our podcast review and a special little segment I got planned. So, can't wait for that. And go ahead and check out SRB Field Rests and Oak Barn Beef. They have some really great stuff that they're doing. SRB Field Rests has a 10% discount. The stuff is really quite good, so you need to go check it out. And then Oak Barn Beef, they are, if you go on to thefowlfront.com, there's a link in there with Oak Barn Beef, and you can sign up for a chance to win a free box delivered to your house of quality, family farm-raised beef straight to your doorstep, and all for just signing up and maybe getting 1 or 2 emails. It's pretty great. So, all right, guys, like I said, I will see you on Friday and then on Monday. Have a good one.